And today we'll be talking about how to care for your sensitive child. We'll be talking to Amy Mercury, who is a craniosacral therapist with a practice in Watertown, Mass. But more importantly, Amy's a mom. She has 3 older boys, and then she has a 5-year-old daughter, Eden, who is, I would describe her as exquisitely sensitive. So Amy will be sharing with us things that she has discovered and developed to care for and kind of protect Eden as a very, very sensitive child. And I would say even more importantly, she's going to share what she has learned from Eden, and even more importantly than that, how she has been able to support Eden in developing her own self-healing capacities. So this is going to be a very special show. And I'm going to begin by asking Amy, so what did you find that you could, how do you support Eden as a very, very sensitive child?
So the best thing I can do for her is listen to her and observe the cues that she's offering about how she's feeling in any situation. And that could be body language of pulling herself in tight, sort of as a protective measure, or it could be expressing something outward, like crying or screaming or any verbal expression that would tell me she's taken in a little too much and just can't take in anymore, that she's going into shutdown.
My sense is, from knowing you from the time when Eden was very small, is that this happened much more often with Eden than with most kids, and that's what gave you the feeling that she was hypersensitive, let's say. And I think you also protected her by providing her pretty much with natural healing rather than with antibiotics and so forth. Can you tell us more about that?
I felt like her system really needed very gentle remedies and reminders to her immune system. One of my big foci was to allow her immune system to develop naturally, which means allowing for some germs to come in, allowing her to get sick or be exposed to different things, and then allowing that system to react in the way that it was created to react. So I used homeopathy. I used some herbal remedies, like in the form of teas, sometimes that I would take in.
While you were breastfeeding, in other words.
When I was breastfeeding, yes, yes. And I basically would say to her, even as she was nonverbal, I knew she could understand me. I would say, you know, check in with your immune system. Tell it, you know, to produce some cells in your bone marrow and move them to your thymus and, you know, tell them to get to work. And it was just really letting her know that she had the capability to do that, and that she was in charge of her body. She was in charge of her immune system, and that she didn't really need anything from the outside to get it to work the way it was designed to. Even when she did catch a cold or a fever, she seemed to move through it pretty quickly. So I would say it definitely, it worked.
You mentioned exposing her to dirt. And of course, you were on a farm for at least part of her early childhood, right? And it's a whole big thing now. There was a book called Eat Dirt. You know, now we're realizing it's actually healthy for kids to pick stuff up and put them in their mouths and be exposed to different things early on. Yeah. You also mentioned that you just allowed her to get some of just the little passing childhood illnesses as a way of strengthening her immune system. And actually, that's very much a part of our paradigm in homeopathy. We say when a child gets a cold or they get a flu or a fever, it's like push-ups for the immune system. It's actually strengthening the immune system. So the idea of suppressing that, say with antibiotics, we know that antibiotics are going to undermine the immune system by affecting the whole gut microbiome. But there's another way in which they do, which is that it's not, the immune system isn't getting practice in dealing with these things. So doubly smart, letting her eat dirt and letting her get a little sick. So in terms of homeopathic remedies, I was going to mention that there's a really amazing homeopathic remedy called Vernix, which I believe you used with Eden.
I did.
Most of the remedies I recommend on my shows are from health food stores that people can easily find. Vernix is a new remedy, not well known, and so people would have to get it online. Vernix is an amazing concept. It was developed by a homeopath whose son was a medical doctor and was able to get a little sample of this lanolin-like white coating that babies are born with. It's like a protective coating that midwives traditionally would rub into the baby's skin and modern hospitals wash off, which we think is one of the reasons that there are a lot of hypersensitivities now, because babies lost this natural protective coating. the reason we associate it with reducing sensitivities is that when this little bit of this lanolin-like covering was made into a homeopathic remedy, then it was put through the homeopathic process. We find out what something is good for. It creates a better sense of boundaries between, or better sense of protection between the person and the outside world, and especially sensory sensitivities like bright light, loud noises, things like that. So is it possible that a lot of children have these sensitivities now because they never got the vernix rubbed in? So I think people will be wondering, people who are familiar with homeopathy know it comes in the form of a little pellet that's like the size of a pea. And how is it safe to give that to a baby? I think people will want to know how you did that with Eden.
So I didn't put the pellet into her mouth. That I know it's probably not exactly a choking hazard, but she wouldn't really know what to do with that with her mouth. I wouldn't recommend it. She could breathe it in. You're right. So it is a choking hazard. She would get some of it by me taking it in, number one, and then getting it through breast milk. But the tablets are also very easily to dissolve into water. And I could then put a little bit of the water on my nipple when she was breastfeeding, or put a little bit on the temples or any thin skin, or even just put a little bit into her mouth with the dropper. Because the meat of the remedy, so to speak, is going to get into that water.
Right, the water actually takes on all the properties of the remedy. And honestly, that's what we do with animals. We get a little dropper and then just put it in the cheek pouch.
Put it in, exactly.
And it's transmitting information to the body's healing energy. So the physical amount of the stuff doesn't matter. Is the information there in the water? And yes, if you put the pellet in the water and stir it really well. And in fact, you can put it in bath water. I don't know if you ever tried that with her.
We did quite a bit, actually. A bath is a great way to do that. What was fun for her also was the little dropper. As she got old enough to hold it, I would give it to her, and she could put it into her mouth so that she got used to the dropper. She got used to that method of delivery. And then even now, she's old enough to take the pellets herself, but when she wasn't quite, she could put the dropper in her mouth herself. And that's another way to empower her to self-heal, to know she can take care of it.
So I'm thinking about different ways sensitivities show up in a child, like food sensitivities, emotional, energetic sensitivities. How did you figure out her food sensitivities?
Well, she cried.
Oh, easy.
She cried a lot, particularly after breastfeeding. And her stools did not look the way that they should, and she almost seemed to be constipated. Sometimes, which doesn't typically happen.
Especially a breastfeeding baby.
A breastfeeding baby, And I had a pretty clean diet at the time. I wasn't eating processed food or anything that wasn't real whole food. So I thought I was doing a great job. But she kept crying, and it seemed like she was in distress. It wasn't just a cry of, I need something. It was this is hurting. And so I started by eliminating. I already did not have gluten in my diet. I had very little sugar, but I did have dairy in my diet, meat, nuts, eggs. So
by the process of elimination, you found that all of those things were causing her distress.
All of those things were causing her distress. Plus, nightshades was taken off the list, and at that point, we were eating water. Some meats, grass-fed meats were okay. Some vegetables were okay. And I was eating like some quinoa at the time and maybe a little bit of rice. But grains didn't do well for my stomach, so there was that. And it was really frustrating, and I didn't like it. And I was resentful. But she was doing better. So that went on for about 2 years, and we slowly reintroduced foods as I felt like her system was getting better, or getting more tolerant, I should say, or growing into itself. You know what? I don't know. We just kind of went with it, and now at almost 6 years old, she doesn't eat gluten still, but everything else has been reintroduced to her diet and is tolerated, although we do keep a limit on the sugar. Try to just keep
I think that's a really important message for parents of kids with food sensitivities. Like, is this going to be the rest of our lives together? The
Right.
fact that in just a couple of years she was able to recover and can eat pretty much anything,
She
any
can eat
healthy
pretty
food,
much
basically.
anything, yeah. And she has a
that's so
pretty good
encouraging.
understanding of
Yeah.
what healthy food is. She will watch her brothers eat something that has bread or gluten in it, and
Oh,
she'll
yeah?
say, guys,
Really? She
that's
says
not,
that?
oh yeah. And she has a pretty good understanding of her
Wow.
body and how things affect her. So